My name is Floyd. I'm 68 years old and I live in Alpharetta in the Georgia countryside, in a quiet corner where the wind still talks to the trees. I've seen a lot in this life, but there is a phrase that, even today, crosses me like a knife. Dad, this year we want a Christmas of our own. With Greg's parents, we need space. Have you ever been excluded by someone you helped build? Have you ever felt that after giving your all, you started to be seen as a hindrance? As if the love you gave was no longer useful? This story I'm going to tell you is not about anger. It's about the silence that comes after ingratitude, about the moment when a father realizes that he has been removed from the table he set up himself for decades. But it's also a story about what happens when you stop asking permission to exist. When you understand, even late, that you deserve to be where you are wanted and not just tolerated. At the end of this video, you will know how a Christmas of absence turned into the day I was reborn. Because sometimes it is at the very moment when we are told stay out that life invites us to really enter. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know something. Not all silence is empty. Sometimes what looks like absence is actually a plan forming silently, piece by piece. Because the moment my daughter Ashley texted me that I wouldn't be welcome at Christmas, she didn't even know I was already building something, not with anger, but with dignity, a house, a supper, a new beginning. And when she saw the photos, when he knocked on my door with red eyes and broken pride, it was too late. What happened that night? It still wakes me up from time to time, and not by the screams, but by what was left in the air after the silence. If you've come this far, it's because you may understand the weight I carry on my chest. I will open this memory with all the care it deserves. But first, if this story has already touched any of your wounds, follow me in full. Sign up, leave your support. Not for me, but for all the people who were once left aside by those they loved the most. We will go together until the end. I promise it's worth it. I remember Christmas last year well. I went to Ashley's house taking 2 pies, a gift for each one, and that old affection that Dad carries even when he is no longer welcome. It was a big, beautiful, modern house, but it seemed small when it came to space for me. The rooms, they said, were all occupied with Greg's family, so I was offered the basement. "It's only for one night, Dad," she said, smiling. As if it were normal to put a 67-year-old man, widower, who gave everything for that family, to sleep next to the washing machine and cardboard boxes. I didn't complain. I have never been one to make a scandal. I did as I always did. I smiled, thanked them, and the next day I woke up earlier than everyone else, prepared pancakes for the whole house, and set the table as I did in the times when my wife was still with us. I stood there, looking at those people who moved as if I were invisible. I heard muffled giggles when I forgot a name or when I repeated a story. Greg exchanged glances with Ashley, as if to say, "Here he goes again." And I really went, because that's what we do when we love. We try to fit in where we don't fit anymore. At the moment of opening the presents, I saw the tree decorated with care, flashing lights, perfect boughs. I delivered what I had bought in advance, nothing luxurious, but thought out with heart. A book of poetry that Ashley liked, a new headset for Greg, toys for their dog. Everyone thanked him, but on automatic. When it was my turn, I received a mug. It said, "Best Grandpa, when present," parenthesized. That was echoing in my head for the rest of the night. At that moment, I smiled on the outside. Inside, it was as if a rope that bound me to that house had broken for good. It was there that I began to understand what I didn't want to see. I was already a visitor, one of those that is tolerated out of obligation, but that breathes a sigh of relief when they leave. The truth is that the rejection did not start that Christmas. It was only wrapped in cheap wrapping paper. I started to remember other moments. Birthdays in which my name was not even mentioned, family gatherings where I stayed in the corner without anyone starting a conversation, jokes about my age, about how I still used a wallet instead of an app. Little things that, added together, show how much you are no longer part of the gear. And you know what hurt the most? It was realizing that I didn't lose space in that house at once. I was losing little by little, like someone who is slowly pushed out of the family photo. Do you know when we realize that we are no longer remembered with joy, but with discomfort? That his presence has become something to be managed, contained, endured? That hit me hard. And now, with this message in early December saying that I shouldn't come because they needed space, everything was clear. In this life, there is a pain that almost no one talks about, that of realizing that you have been gradually disappearing from the life of the one you put first. As if, all of a sudden, you just made weight. Have you experienced this? If this pain has touched you in any way, write here in the comments, "I've lived it," or "It's true." I want to know who else carries this kind of silence in their chest. But back to that night. After I came back from the basement the next day and saw everyone laughing without even noticing my presence, I sat in the car and took a deep breath before starting. A part of me wanted to believe that I was exaggerating. That was something in my head. But another part, the most tired, already knew. I was a piece that no longer fit. On the way back to Alpharetta, I decided that maybe it was time to stop trying, but I did not yet know what that meant. I only knew that that year would be the last in which I would make myself available to those who no longer saw me. What they didn't know was that the man they were silently excluding also knew how to be silent. But mine was different. My silence was loaded with plan, and it was in this silence that a decision began to be born. But do you know what happens when a quiet man decides to act? Do you know what goes on in the heart of someone who, after being rejected, chooses to start over? Not with vengeance, but with dignity? Well, I'll tell you, but not now. Because what happened next? No one in that family was prepared to see it. It was an ordinary December afternoon. The light poured in through the kitchen window, filtered through the curtains my late wife sewed years ago. On the radio, Nat King Cole sang the Christmas song, as he did every year when the house was filled with smells and laughter. I was preparing my old cranberry cake recipe, the one Ashley said was the official smell of Christmas when she was little. I put the dough in the oven, dried my hands on the tea towel, and went to check my cell phone. A notification. Her name on the screen. I smiled, not knowing that this would be the last light smile of my year. The message read, "Dad, this year we are going to spend Christmas with only Greg's parents. We need space." I read it once, then another, and one more. There was no typo. It was not an invitation, nor a suggestion of an alternative meeting. It was a decision, an order masked as justification. We need space. My chest weighed down in a strange way. It wasn't just pain. It was as if everything I had experienced until then was being ripped away with one sentence. I sat right there, on the wooden chair near the countertop, and stared at the lit screen. For a moment, the radio continued to play, as if mocking the moment. That soft voice saying, "Chestnuts roasting on an open fire," while inside me everything seemed to go out. My first reaction was silence. My body stopped. My head was empty, but the heart seemed to scream. I thought about answering with regret. I thought about writing down everything that had been stuck in my throat for years. But I'm not like that. I never was. I took a deep breath, erased what I was going to write, and typed, "I wish you a beautiful Christmas. Enjoy." And I sent it. She saw it right away, but he did not answer. Not an emoji. Not even a thank you. Nothing. That dismantled me in a way that I didn't even feel in the wakes of life. I stood there, motionless, with the cup cooling in my hand and the smell of cranberry taking over the house as if mocking me. I began to remember everything I built with her. Christmas in Vermont, when she was a child and was excited just to see snow. The time I hid the presents in the garage and she discovered me, and we laughed so hard that I cried. The movies repeated on the couch, the same socks we bought every year just to make fun of the photos. Where did all this go? At what point did it turn to dust? At what point in life did my daughter come to see me as someone who needed space? I don't know if you've experienced this, but there's a pain that comes without noise. She just arrives, sits with you in the living room and looks at you as if to say, "It's over." And that's what I felt that night. It wasn't anger, it was mourning. I fight for a place that I always thought was mine. I was a present father, I was a shelter, I was silence when she cried in the room. I went to the ground for her to walk when the world shook, and now there was no room for me. But that same night, something began to change inside me. It was there, between the beeping oven and the cell phone in silent mode, that I realized, maybe after so many years of being the first to arrive, I needed to learn to be the first to leave. But leaving, where to? And what to do after you are removed from the only place you called home? I didn't know yet, but that question haunted me for days, and it was precisely she who took me to the place where everything would turn. And you can't imagine what happened when the answer finally knocked on my door. That night, after the message, I sat on the porch with a blanket on my lap, and my heart tightened. Alpharetta's sky was clear, and the stars shone with an indifference that only time can teach. I stood there, staring at nothing, while the memory brought back things that I had kept for a long time without realizing it. I remembered the time when Ashley was still a girl, and I did everything to balance work and presence. After her mother left, I needed to be two in one. Father and mother, strength and lap, laughter and structure. I turned down promotions because I didn't want to travel so much. I stopped buying a new car to be able to pay for dance courses, summer camp, French classes. And when she wanted to go to Ireland for an exchange program, I sold my boat, my only luxury, a piece of my youth. But she dreamed of it, and I dreamed her dreams. When she and Greg decided to buy the house in Decatur, who made the down payment? I. When they got married, I was the one who paid for the buffet, the flowers, the music. I didn't even make a point of speech. I thought that my presence alone spoke for itself. When they traveled, I was the one who took care of the dog, the mail, the garden. I was always there, always. And now there was no room for me at Christmas. Christmas that, for years, only happened because I made it happen. That night gave me a kind of cold that didn't come from the wind. It was an internal cold, a realization that hurt more than the absence. I was never seen. I was used. I was a resource, a hand that gave, a shoulder that held, a mouth that smiled when needed. But I was never remembered as someone who also needed to be taken care of. And then the penny dropped. Maybe it was my fault. Because I never complained, I never said no, I never asked for anything in return. I've always made it look easy, and when you make it look too easy, people forget that it's expensive. That has an emotional price being paid in silence. There in that worn-out wooden chair, I whispered something to myself that I had never had the courage to say, "Enough." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just let it slip away. Enough. And this arrival was not a goodbye, it was enough. For the first time, it was not sadness that dominated me. It was an icy lucidity, a kind of clarity that comes when love is tired of asking for attention. I understood that if I wanted some kind of peace, it wouldn't come from Ashley. It wouldn't come from that house. It wouldn't come from trying to be accepted where I've already been pushed out. And it was at that very point, sitting there with my eyes fixed on the night, that I began to remember the people who once crossed my path with truth, people who may never have had much, but have always been considerate. The gardener from when I lived in Roswell, the librarian who has accompanied my wife for the past few months, Mr. Henry, a retired pastor who visited me when loneliness was pressing. My old friend Joseph, fellow in the factory who always said, "You're the best man I've ever met." I thought about each one, and I realized that maybe, just maybe, there was still room for me. not at my daughter's house, but in the heart of those who really saw me, and it was there, between memory and sorrow, that the idea began to be born. A simple idea, but strong as an ancient root. What if, this year, Christmas happened my way? Only with those who really wanted me around, only with those who have never treated me like a burden. I didn't know how to do that yet, but I knew it wouldn't diminish me anymore. And do you believe that when we make a decision like this, the universe begins to respond? Because the next morning, something arrived at my door, and I promise that it was there that everything started to change. The Sunday before Christmas arrived, as if not asking for permission. I opened my eyes and realized that this would be the first Christmas of my life without any preparation. I didn't buy a tree. I didn't hang lights. I didn't take the ornaments out of the red box in the basement closet. For the first time, there was no smell of pine, nor the sound of my old Christmas playlist playing on the kitchen radio. It was just silence. A silence that did not come from peace. It came from oblivion. I walked slowly down the hallway, aimlessly. The pictures on the walls stared back at me. Ashley at the age of 2, dressed as a reindeer. Then at 7, sitting on my lap, laughing with her mouth open. The wedding photo, where I was still smiling with pride. Those images were frozen in time, but something about them had changed for me. Because now I knew that father in the photo no longer existed in her life. I tried to put on a movie to pass the time. I chose It's a Wonderful Life, which always moved me. But I couldn't see even 10 minutes. It was too hard to look at a plot where a man feels he's worth nothing, and yet he's rescued by everyone around him. While I there on my cold couch didn't hear any bell ringing, no voice calling my name, the house seemed bigger than ever. But it was not space, it was echo. I went to the kitchen, grabbed pen and paper, and sat at the same table where years ago Ashley did homework while I made coffee. I wrote a letter, not for her, not for anyone. It was for me, just for me. I started like this. I went down, but now I'm dust. I wrote slowly, as if sewing the wounds one by one. I described the feeling of having been everything to someone and suddenly becoming nobody. I remembered small details that only the heart keeps. The time she fell off the swing and I ran without shoes on the gravel to pick her up. The night she had a high fever and I sat on the edge of the bed, praying, without sleep. All of this was getting stuck in this paper as if the pen drained the pain. When I was done, I folded the letter and put it inside the drawer of the cabinet. I don't know why. Maybe not to throw it away. Perhaps to remember years later that even at rock bottom I was still able to write. It was there, in that worn wooden chair, that I felt the bottom itself, the place where silence mixes with tiredness, and tiredness mixes with the desire to disappear. Not of the world, but of memories. It makes you want to forget who you were, just to stop missing those who don't see you anymore. No. I'm here opening my heart, telling my story with all that is beautiful and painful. If you're listening, if any part of this touched your heart, leave a like on this video. And if you can, subscribe here to the channel. I still have a lot of things saved to share, and if this rant is also serving you to feel less alone, so it was worth it. That night, I turned off all the lights in the house, except for a lamp on the porch. I sat there listening to the wind blowing on the trees, wondering how many other people were sitting like me, waiting for a message that would not come, an invitation that was not made, a memory that did not arrive. It is a loneliness that has no sound, but it has weight. And I carried this weight on my chest like an anchor. But it was on that night of absolute silence, on that empty Sunday, that an idea began to form without me realizing it. It was subtle, like a light breeze passing under the door. Something inside me was still breathing. It was still pulsating. A part that didn't want to die. What if I told you that in the midst of all this emptiness, Was something completely unexpected about to happen, something that would start as a memory, but what would become at the beginning of my turn? Would you believe it? Well, then prepare your heart, because what happened the next morning changed everything. The next morning, I opened my eyes before the sun even showed up. It wasn't the alarm clock that got me out of bed. It was something different. A good restlessness, as if something had turned inside me while I was sleeping. I no longer had that weight that had been crushing me in the last few days. The pain was still there, of course, but he was standing, and there was a new voice behind it. A voice that said, "You don't have to beg for a place where you've already been expelled." I got up slowly, took a long shower, put on my best blue shirt, the one I wore at the company's dinners, and went to the kitchen. I made a stronger coffee than usual, without haste, with the care of someone who is preparing something for an important visit. I sat on the porch, cup in hand, and began to observe the terrain. The magnolias swaying slightly, the wooden fence I repaired myself last fall, the iron bench my wife loved. It was all so simple. But there, for the first time in days, I felt whole. It was then that I made my decision. I was no longer going to ask for a chair at anyone's table, much less at Christmas. I was going to set up mine, not out of anger, not out of pride, but out of self-love. Because if there's something that life has taught me, it's that we need from time to remember who we are, before others erase it from us. I walked into the house, grabbed my old black notebook from the desk drawer, and wrote on the front page, "Guest list for real Christmas." And I started. First name, Joseph. A friend of decades, a factory colleague, the only one who showed up every month with a bag of peanuts and a new story to tell. Then Mrs. Myrna, my neighbor across the street, widowed for 15 years, who always left a plate of cake at my door on holidays. I remembered Pastor Henry, who retired but never stopped calling to see how I was doing. I also tagged Patricia, my wife's great-niece, who kept saying that she felt more at home with me than with her own parents. Kept. I wrote down the names of the people at the Marietta Church, the senior meetings, 2 GE friends I hadn't seen in a while, but who never failed to send birthday cards. The more names I put in, the more my chest filled. I wasn't alone. It was just badly distributed. The problem is that we get used to revolving around those who no longer revolve around us. We forget that there is a world outside that little bubble where they put us. And that's when I understood. It wasn't about fitting anymore. It was about being remembered. And that Christmas I would be. I picked up the phone. I called Joseph first. His voice, hoarse and firm, replied excitedly, "Floyd, boy, how I miss you. How are you?" I spoke of my idea. He agreed right away. "Of course I will, and I'm going to take my famous pumpkin bread." I called Myrna. She cried. He said he couldn't wait to spend a Christmas with real people. And so it was. Each call was like pulling a forgotten thread of my own history. Each sim was a brick rebuilding my place in the world. I wasn't going to wait for any more invitation. I was going to invite. I wasn't going to accept crumbs. I was going to serve supper. And it wasn't just about food. It was about memory, affection, presence. It was about making that Christmas a mirror of what I had always been, someone who cared, who welcomed, who was there. But this time, it would be for those who were also for me. Now the most important thing was missing. Where was all this going to happen? Because what I had in mind, it was no small feat. And I'll tell you. But first, you need to know. What happened in the following days was bigger than I expected, much bigger. Few people know, but I have never been a man to spend for nothing. I learned from my father that well-kept money can become freedom. Since 2015, I started to put a part of what was left in small shares, those companies that no one gives anything to at the beginning. I studied alone, read the newspaper every day, learned to observe. There was a time when I was a partner in a sustainable agriculture project, and over time, the seeds I planted, literally and financially, began to bear fruit. No one in the family knew. I have never been one to show off. While I helped Ashley with the entrance to the house, with the furniture, with the new car, I kept as little as I could, quietly. And in 2019, without making a fuss, I bought a house in Serembe. Serembe is a different place. It's about 50 minutes from Atlanta, but it looks like another planet. There is no high fence or noise there. The streets are dirt, neighbors greet each other by name, and time seems to move slowly. The house was my retirement plan. A corner of my own away from everything, with a vegetable garden in the backyard, a wooden balcony, and a lake that reflects the sky like a mirror. I never told Ashley, not because he hid it, but because he never asked. That morning, notebook in hand and heart steady, I picked up the phone and called the manager of the local restaurant there, Paul, a polite guy, always willing to help. I explained that I wanted a special dinner, complete with everything that tasted like Christmas: turkey, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, roasted vegetables, apple pie. He was silent for a second and then said, "Mr. Floyd, it will be an honor." I hung up, took a deep breath and called Pastor Henry. "Pastor, I'm organizing a supper, one that has a soul. I would like you to open with a prayer." He was also silent, then laughed softly and said, "I knew that one day you would get up." Each call I made was like pulling an invisible thread and reconnecting something that was loose in me. It wasn't just about setting up a dinner. It was about picking up the pieces of my dignity, part by part. I would no longer be remembered as the father who slept in the basement or the grandfather who got a mug with mockery. I was going to be remembered as the man who, even though he was forgotten, never forgot who he was. Incidentally, if you've come this far with me, listening to all this, let me tell you something from the bottom of my heart. The strongest in history is yet to come. Don't turn it off now, because there is a moment, an instant, that will still happen, and when it arrives, you will understand why I never had to explain myself to anyone again. After settling dinner, I started thinking about the details. The decoration of the house, simple and elegant. Yellow lights, native pine trees all around, large solid wood table that I had made in 2020 with a carpenter from the region. The house was ready, waiting. It was as if she knew that one day she would have to really welcome me. I spent the afternoon calling the names on my list. With each confirmation, my chest adjusted a little more. People who had no luxury, but had memory. People who didn't want selfies, wanted hugs. I knew it wasn't going to be a Christmas with expensive gifts or rehearsed speeches, but it was going to be the truest Christmas I've ever had. I ended the day with a glass of wine, sitting on the porch of Serembe's house. The silence there was different. It didn't weigh him. It was a silence of peace from the roots. I looked up at the sky and thought of my wife. I did it, love. Even without knowing how, I got up. But of course, the world is round, and what we plant eventually comes back. And that same day, while I was organizing the final details, a notification lit up on my cell phone screen. Her name, Ashley. After days of silence, a message, short, cold, but enough to make my heart beat differently. Can you imagine what she wrote? Because I never expected to read that, and when I read it, I realized the tables had turned, but not in the way she expected. The hours after that message from Ashley were a tight knot in my stomach. But instead of answering right away, I put the phone aside and went back to focusing on what really mattered, the Christmas I was building with my own hands, with my soul, with the memories I still knew how to love. As she arranged the last details at Serembe's house, the phone kept going, and each call answered was like a brick laid in the wall of my hope. Joseph confirmed that he would come with his wife. He said that she was preparing shortbread cookies with crystal sugar coating, Mrs. Myrna moved, asked to bring her famous bread pudding, and even asked if she could take her grandson, a quiet boy who loved to hear my stories from the GE era. The gardener, Mr. Raoul, showed up without me even calling. He saw me on the porch and said he wanted to stop by before supper. He brought a plant, a type of red flower that blooms only in winter. He said, "Mr. Floyd, you were the first boss who treated me like people. I never forgot it. That broke me inside." The librarian at the time my wife became ill, Mrs. Bernice, also responded. He said he still remembered the letters I left hidden in the books my wife read to brighten up her days. "That kind of love is no longer seen, Mr. Floyd. I'm going with great pleasure." Each confirmation was a truth that was born within me. I was not alone. I never was. I was just looking the wrong way. We hurt ourselves too much trying to be loved by those who don't see us, and forget that there are people out there who would give the world just to have a coffee with us and hear our laughter. There was a moment, right after I hung the lights at the entrance of the house, that I stopped and watched the village gain color. The fireplace had already been tested, the wood stacked, the large table receiving the first simple arrangements of pine and candles. And there, with my hands full of dust and my face sweaty from the effort, I felt a kind of joy that had not visited me for a long time. Because it wasn't noisy joy, one of those of a party with champagne and loud music. It was a joy for those who were remembered, who, even though he was discarded by some, was still missed by many. Pause for reflection. No. Sometimes we spend so much time trying to fit into a place that no longer belongs to us, that we forget to look around and see who would really welcome us without having to ask. True love does not need formal invitations. He just needs space. If you've ever experienced something similar, if you've ever felt forgotten by those who should value you, comment below. He writes like this: "I understand you," or "I know how it is," because no one should have to carry this pain alone. Returning to that day, as the sky of Serenbe was preparing for another cold night, I received another call. It was from the young couple who lived near my old home, the Thompsons. They said they learned about the dinner from Mrs. Myrna and asked if they could show up. "You have always been so kind to our children." They call him Grandpa Floyd to this day. And so the list grew. Not with important names, not with titles, but with affection, with crossed stories, with silent gratitude. And then I remembered Ashley's message. I had not yet responded. She wrote, "Hi Dad, can we talk? Is that it?" Short, cold. But for the first time it didn't hurt, because now I knew. If she wanted to talk, it was because the emptiness finally hit there too. The kind of emptiness that only appears when absence screams louder than pride. I didn't answer at that moment. I took a deep breath and continued organizing the house. There was more to do. There were people coming. People who wanted me around. And it was there, putting the names on the places at the table, that something happened. A name popped into my mind, a name I didn't expect to remember. But when I remembered, I knew that fate was just beginning to draw what would come next. And the strangest thing, it was the way that name came back to me, as if it had been blown away by time itself. Want to know who it was? You won't believe what's next. Christmas Eve has arrived with that fine chill that enters through the bones, even when the house is warm. But there in Serenbe, everything seemed to be in order. The wood was already crackling in the fireplace. The smell of cinnamon, apples and pine spread through the rooms. The lights on outside turned the balcony golden. The table was set, not with luxury, but with truth. Simple plates, white fabric napkins, small sprigs of rosemary tied with string in the cutlery. All the way my wife would have liked it. Everything as I always imagined doing, but never had space. Until now. I walked through the house in silence. Seeing everything tidy, clean, welcoming, brought me a different peace. But inside me, something was still burning. It wasn't hatred, it wasn't grief shouted. It was that kind of low, almost mute pain that only those who have been forgotten by those who created with their own hands are able to feel. You know that wound that no one sees, but that you feel every time you take a deep breath? That was it. I didn't want to think about her, but I did. I took out my cell phone, sat on the couch, and did what I shouldn't. I went on social media. The first photo was already there, Ashley sitting at the white table with Greg smiling next to her. 2 glasses of wine, empty plates, candlelight, everything arranged like a magazine cover, and the caption, that caption. Minimalist Christmas with those who matter. I almost dropped the phone on the floor. The world didn't stop, but inside me something froze. It wasn't just the choice of words, it was the subtext. It was the twinge that comes from someone who knows exactly where to hurt, and it hurts without blinking. I closed the phone. I held on tight. I wasn't going to answer. I wasn't going to explain myself, nor trying to fix what she never really wanted to understand. The truth is that we can teach values, give everything, carry on our shoulders, but there is no way to force anyone to recognize it. And there, in that photo, in that sentence, I understood. She not only left me out, she wanted to erase me, as if I were an uncomfortable volume in a corner of the bookshelf. I got up slowly, went to the bedroom, changed clothes and went to bed early. Christmas was the next day, and for the first time in a long time, I wouldn't be the forgotten ornament in the corner of the room. I wouldn't have to squeeze into the end of the table or sleep in the basement or listen to jokes disguised as worry. For the first time, I was going to be the center of my own table, the owner of the house, the name remembered, the desired hug. That's it. This had no caption that erased it. But before I closed my eyes, with the low light of the lamp and the smell of warm wood in the air, I had a strange feeling. Something was about to happen. I don't know if it was intuition, memory, or warning, but a thought came to me so clear that it made me turn sideways and stay awake for a while longer. And if she realizes, but is it too late? This question accompanied me until sleep came, because sometimes when the supper begins in silence, that's where the whole world listens. The clock struck 6 o'clock sharp. I had been standing by the door for a good few minutes, but it wasn't until the hands met at number 12 that I mustered up the courage to turn the handle. I opened slowly, as if opening a new chapter of life with trembling hands, and what I saw outside, it still moves me just to remember it. There was no expensive gift. No one brought store bags or boxes with red ribbons. But the eyes of the people who came to me that night said more than any package. There they were, one by one. People who crossed my path in moments that no one else saw. People who remembered me without me having to remind them. Robert was the first, childhood friend. We hadn't seen each other for more than 10 years. He had a Tupperware covered with old tea towels. It was the pecan pie his mother made when we were boys. I made it with her recipe. I thought you would like it. And I hugged that man as if he were the last bond of my youth, because it was. Right behind came Myrna, with a tin of gingerbread cookies, each one wrapped in cloths embroidered with cross-stitch, something she sewed herself. He gave me a kiss on the cheek and whispered, "This Christmas is ours, Floyd." Joseph showed up with an old, vintage wine, one of those that we save for special occasions. When he handed me the bottle, his eyes were full of water. He just said, "It was time for someone to recognize the man you are." And I knew, without him saying it, that he knew everything. From Ashley, exclusion, of the cruel phrase. Curious how no one said her name, no one asked. Nobody wanted to know if I had answered the message, if it was going to appear. It was as if everyone already understood and respected the silence where too much pain could fit. The language there was different. It was respect. It was presence. He was careful. People who looked me in the eye and saw beyond the old man in the blue dress shirt. They saw the whole man, the one who took care of it, the one who suffered in silence, what he loved until he was forgotten. And inside the house, the heat was different. It wasn't just the fireplace lit, it was the warmth of affection, from the smell of handmade food, from low laughter, from stories that intersected effortlessly. I sat at the end of the table. But not because I was sent there, I went by choice. Because this time it was my table, and I could be wherever I wanted. Pastor Henry said a prayer that drew tears even from those who said they did not cry. He spoke about ties that resist time, about the strength of staying whole when the world tries to break us. And there, at that moment, with those hands held around the table, I understood something that I had never seen so clearly. Family is not who shares blood. He is the one who divides the soul. If this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, will it help me to carry it forward? Like this video, subscribe here to the channel. This makes more difference than you think. Sometimes we just need to hear that we are not alone to be able to take the next step. After the prayer, we had dinner. Simple food, but full of flavor. Each one told a story, remembered something old, laughed with their mouths full. I felt part of it. Not a family theater, but something real, genuine. The kind of Christmas that, if my wife were alive, she would have loved to live. The night went by, slow, delicious. And I thought, this is what I needed. It was not forgiveness, it was no explanation. It was belonging. Only outside, as the house filled with laughter, there was something else in the air, a different wind, as if something or someone was coming. And that's when I heard it. 3 dry knocks on the front door, a pause, and 2 more. At that moment, time seemed to stop, because what was on the other side, I never would have imagined. The knocks on the door still echoed as I got up from the table. Everyone was silent. It was not the type of combined visit. The clock struck shortly after 8, and outside the cold was already biting the leaves. I walked to the door slowly, my heart beating faster than I expected. Open, but it wasn't her. It was the postman of the region, Mr. Walter, delivering a late package. He handed me a small box, wished me a Merry Christmas, Mr. Floyd, and left smiling. I returned to the living room with the box in my hand and my breathing returning to normal. Patricia, my great-niece, who had been there since early morning with her camera hanging around her neck, laughed softly and said, "If it were a movie, this would be the scene of the new beginning." I smiled back, and without anyone asking, she started photographing. Patricia has always had a special look. Since I was little, I would take my old camera and spend hours recording details, fallen leaves, dog eyes, wrinkled hands. And that night, she did the same. He photographed the plates already half empty, the glasses with fingerprints, the calm faces, the smoke rising from the teacup. He asked permission to put together a small album on her Instagram. He said he wanted to keep that Christmas as a treasure. It was the most sincere of my life, Uncle Floyd. She posted the photos right there, sitting on the couch, with her feet covered by a plaid blanket. He put a simple caption, but it crossed me like a hot knife in butter. With whom it really matters. A few minutes later, the likes, comments, shares began. It was all light, warm. People saying that it was Christmas spirit, people moved by the simplicity of the images. But then came the notification. Someone tagged Ashley. I saw her name there in blue. It was marked. She saw it. I thought about taking the cell phone out of Patricia's hand, asking to delete it, but I didn't do anything. Because that was not a provocation. It was only true. And sometimes, that's what hurts the most in those who have moved away, seeing that life went on without her. I don't know what Ashley felt when she saw the photos. I only know what I felt, a kind of silent liberation. Not because I wanted her to suffer, he never wanted to, but because she needed to understand that that Christmas was not a punishment for her. It was a cure for me. For the first time in years, I wasn't the extra at someone's party. I was the host of my own story. And, you know, if you've come this far with me, if you're still listening to this long conversation of mine, I'll tell you with my heart in my hand, there's still a moment, only one, which will show you why this story is not just about Christmas. It's about getting up when no one else expects you to get up. That night after the laughter, the dishes collected and the coffee served, I sat alone on the balcony. The sky was clear, with few stars visible, but still beautiful. The house was full inside, but inside me, a corner was still waiting for something, as if the page had not yet been turned for good, as if someone was yet to arrive. And it was then, at that very moment, I heard the sound of tires on the dirt road. A car. Low beams. Hesitant steps on the gravel. And this time, I knew who it was, and she also knew what she was looking for. The car stereo cut off the soft music that was still playing in the back of the room. It was an instrumental track, one of those that seemed to come from inside us more than from the speakers. Myrna, who was standing by the window, stopped fiddling with her scarf and whispered, "Floyd, there's someone out there." I walked to the door slowly, as if walking on a glass floor. The unlit headlight did not hide the shape of the black SUV. I knew that car. I even knew the way the engine turned off. Ashley left first. Hurried steps, coat thrown over his shoulders, cell phone in hand. Greg came behind, slower, with his hands in his pockets and his gaze down as if he had been pulled by his tie there. I opened the door before it slammed, but she had already been talking loudly. "Why did you do that, Dad? Why did you call everyone and not me?" Her voice cut through the hot air of the house like a knife in ice. Everyone in the room listened. Myrna stood motionless, with the cup suspended. Patricia put down her plate and held her cell phone firmly. Joseph gave me a worried look, the kind of look you give to someone about to be hit. But I stood firm. I looked my daughter in the eyes, without haste, without anger, only with the calm of someone who has suffered enough not to have to scream. "You told me not to come, Ashley. So, I stayed." The phrase came out like a whisper, but it seemed to resonate through the walls of the entire house. Her brow furrowed. Pride still wanted to fight, but the rest of the body already said something else. There was fatigue in her eyes, and also something that had not been seen for a long time: guilt. She looked around, saw the house lit up, the fireplace burning, the people gathered. He saw the serene faces, and then the face of his father. Not the old man alone on Decatur's couch, but the complete man in Serenby. Greg tried to pull her by the arm. "Let's talk somewhere else." But she let go. I was shaking. "You never told me about this house. I never said I had all that." I took a deep breath. "You never asked." And there, at that time, I saw something break inside her. Not pain, but of understanding. She didn't expect to see me well. I didn't expect to see myself strong. Because when we discard someone, we expect them to remain in the place where they were left. But I left the corner, and she saw it. No, there are memories that stick to us like road dust. We can even move on, but they stay. I remember Ashley's first Christmas. She, in her red pajamas, opening the gift with more paper than toy. I remember the smell of cinnamon in the kitchen, her mother's laughter, us dancing in the middle of the room. Simple things, but that stick to the soul. And at that time, while my daughter looked at me as if she saw a stranger, I felt all these memories going up to my throat. Pause for a second here with me, listen to me. Do you also have a memory like that? One that never came out of the inside, even with time? If so, share it with me in the comments. It can be just a word. And I remember. I've lived it. Because sometimes just sharing the memory is a way to go lighter. Ashley was still standing there. The guests began to move slowly, respecting the moment. No one left. No one pretended not to see it. But everyone understood that this was not just about a surprise visit. It was about too long an absence. Greg finally said, "We didn't imagine it would be like this." And then he stopped, because there was nothing to say. "You wanted space," I said with quiet firmness. And I did. She looked away. Patricia still held her cell phone, but did not film. He just held on. I think that deep down, she knew that some things are not for social media. They are for the soul. Ashley then stepped forward, but I didn't open my arms, not this time, waited. And in the midst of silence, she whispered, "You still keep that Christmas ornament, the little doll I made with salt dough." My breath failed, because yes. I kept it. He kept everything. But what came next? No one there could have predicted it, neither did she, me neither, because sometimes when we open the door to the past, comes along a truth that was waiting to come out, and when it came out, he no longer fit in silence. Ashley took another step and, without waiting for a gesture from me, crossed the threshold of the door. The house, which until minutes before had been a shelter for laughter and recovered memories, plunged into a thick silence. The guests stopped. Myrna, sitting in the armchair by the fireplace, adjusted the blanket on her legs, but did not say a word. Joseph carefully placed his glass on the table. Even Pastor Henry, always serene, lowered his eyes. It was as if everyone knew that this moment was not to be interrupted. Ashley walked slowly, but with her eyes like blades. He walked through every corner of the room as if it were an inspection, not a visitor. He stopped in front of the decorated table, looked at the arrangement with dried pine cones, the antique iron candlestick, the porcelain plate inherited from my mother. "Where did all this come from?" she asked, without staring at me. "How long have you had this house?" It took me a while to answer, because the truth sometimes comes slowly. Since 2019. She turned her body towards me, her eyes wide. 4 years, and you never told me? You never asked. The sentence came out cold, not with anger, but with the precision of someone who has been carrying this weight for a long time. Ashley frowned, tried to retrace the train of thoughts. "But this here, it's expensive, it's refined. Italian marble in the kitchen, Persian rug in the living room. What is that, Dad?" Her tone was not one of enchantment. He was in possession, wounded, as if what she saw was not mine, but something that should have passed through her before it was revealed to the world. I took a deep breath. "This here is my silence. It's the years you've spent treating me like a bank balance, like an emotional line of credit." The whole house seemed to listen. The eyes turned, not with judgment, but with that attention that is only given to the definitive moments. Patricia stopped chewing, dropped the plate on her lap. Even the fire in the fireplace seemed to go down. Ashley crossed her arms. He tried to compose himself, but the expression was no longer that of a daughter. It belonged to those who lost control of their own domain. "You hid it from me." "I didn't hide it. I just never offered it. You only came to me when you needed something, but never from me." "That's not fair," she countered. "You excluded me." Time stopped inside my chest, and then I answered, not loud, but firm. "You discarded me." Those words, I had never said it, not even for myself, but there they came out in one piece, and they fixed themselves in the air like an arrow that finds the center of the target. Ashley took a step back. Greg looked away, and the pain that was always only on my side. Suddenly it seemed to be going through her chest as well. "Do you think I didn't feel your absence?" she said. "That it didn't hurt to spend Christmas without you there?" "No. I think you missed the control, not my presence." She was silent, "because I knew. And at that moment, I saw. My daughter was no longer the child in the photo frame. She was an adult woman who made choices, and now dealt with their consequences." Greg cleared his throat, as if he wanted it to end soon, but no one left. Because sometimes, the confrontation that we avoid the most, it is what liberates the most. And when I saw that her eyes began to fill, and it wasn't from anger, I knew. The facade was crumbling, not because I knocked her down, but because she was never strong enough to stand the truth. She looked around once more, not knowing where to lay her eyes, as if everything in that house was a reminder of what she didn't know in me. "You built all of this, and he didn't include me in anything, because you had already left me outside long before that." And before she could answer, the back door opened. It was old Robert coming with the hot pie he had gone to get from the car. But what he carried in his hands, it would change everything, and it would make Ashley see with her own eyes what she really lost. Robert walked slowly through the back door, carrying the platter with the pecan pie, wrapped in a flowery cloth that reminded me of my mother's kitchen. When he saw Ashley standing in the middle of the room, his eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't say anything. He just walked to the kitchen and left the plate on the table. Ashley, on the other hand, seemed more and more lost. Her eyes scanned the walls, the details of the bookshelf, the faces of the guests who avoided looking at her out of respect for me. And then she started crying, a nervous, choked cry, half scream, half supplication. "You're throwing away your own daughter, Dad!" That sentence crossed me, not because I believed in her, but because for many years that was my biggest fear, that by imposing myself, I would lose once and for all what was left of the Ashley I created. But at that moment, I understood that maybe I had never lost her, because maybe she never really came back after the wedding. Maybe the last time I saw my real daughter was before she started to see me as a nuisance. I walked slowly to the door. The words had been inside me for days, maybe years, waiting for a moment when I would have the courage to say them. I stopped in front of her. I looked him right in the eye, not those of the child who ran across the porch with a bow in his hair, but of the grown woman, full of reason and blank of listening. "Ashley, this house is for those who respect me. Today, you're not one of those people." The silence fell heavy, like an unexpected snow on a hot, late afternoon. Greg rehearsed a step ahead. He opened his mouth, but when he looked around and saw the faces, all firm, attentive, silent, he backed off. Even he understood that there was no room for intervention there. Ashley screamed again. "You can't do this to me. I am your daughter." I took a deep breath. "You did it first." She froze. It was as if he didn't expect me to finally put a mirror on words, as if the submissive father, always available, always quiet, had disappeared. And, in fact, he disappeared. In the place there was only one whole man, a man with scars and dignity. Ashley looked around as if seeking refuge, but no one reached out. No one offered consolation, not even Greg. He just put his hand on her shoulder and said quietly, as if he was too tired to fight, "Let's go." And then she turned around. No more screaming, only the teary eyes. He walked through the door with firm steps, but without a destination, and when the door closed behind her with that dry click, there was no applause, nor immediate relief. There was a deafening silence. One of those that come after the thunder, when the world seems suspended between the end and the new beginning. I stood there for a second, hearing the sound of the SUV's engine pulling away on the dirt road, and then I felt a warm hand on my shoulder. It was Myrna. He said nothing. He just pulled me close, in a short and firm hug, as if to say, "You did it right." Robert approached with 2 glasses of wine. He handed one to me, lifted his. "To courage, Floyd. To the right choices." I returned to the room. The music resumed slowly. The heat of the fireplace seemed more intense. The table, previously a scene of tension, now gained the sweet smell of supper again. And I, for the first time in many years, I sat down knowing that I didn't owe anyone anything anymore. But what I didn't know, that same night while everyone was toasting, Ashley hadn't gone home. And what did she do next? It would still mess with everything. Supper followed. Gradually, the sounds returned. The cutlery clinked again on the plates. The low laughter mingled with the smell of cinnamon, stuffed turkey, freshly cut pumpkin pie. But even with all this, there was a new kind of silence in the house. It was no longer the silence of loneliness. It was a respectful silence, of reverence, of someone who witnesses something rare, someone who stood up after years bent by the weight of other people's expectations. Patricia approached slowly. He pulled my sleeve gently and led me to a more reserved corner near the wooden sideboard. She looked into my eyes firmly, but also with an affection that only the sensitive know how to offer. "You did what many would not have the courage to do, Uncle Floyd. Cutting is not a lack of love. It is an excess of dignity." I didn't answer. I just nodded. Because there are things that we live and keep, but maybe by telling, we help another heart to breathe. If this story is stirring you, help me make her go further, like this video and subscribe here to the channel. It may seem small, but for me it's like a hug that crosses the screen. After that conversation with Patricia, I needed some air. I walked slowly to the backyard. The lawn was damp from the serene of the night, and the lights I placed on the trees reflected in the waters of the small artificial lake that I had built soon after I bought the land. I've always liked water. It calms me down. It reminds me that everything passes. I stayed there for a while. The muffled noise of the party continued inside the house, but outside it was just me and the night. I looked at the stars and thought about everything I had experienced. In the times when I swallowed hard, when I made myself small, when I convinced myself that accepting crumbs was a way to keep the peace. And now, I knew that it was over. The cycle of depending on Ashley's approval, of making concessions after concessions, just so as not to be forgotten, had ended right there at that door when she left. For the first time, I was whole. Not because everything had worked out, but because I didn't owe anyone anything anymore. And there, alone, looking at the reflection of the illuminated house in the calm water, I understood that being a father is not only giving, but also knowing when to stop giving yourself to those who no longer see value. I was on the ground for many years, but now I was a ceiling. I slowly went back inside. Joseph called me to toast again. Myrna laughed out loud with Pastor Henry, like two children in the backyard of the church. The song was now more lively, one of those instrumental versions that makes us tap our feet on the ground without realizing it. But deep down, right in the corner of my intuition, something began to vibrate, that feeling that the story was not yet complete, that silence, no matter how respectful it would soon be interrupted. Because life sometimes doesn't just give us closure, it tests us. And that night, even before the clock struck midnight, something happened outside. Something that made Patricia put down her cell phone. Joseph stopped the music, and Myrna got up from the armchair with one hand on her chest. Because not everything that is cut, he accepts to be disconnected forever, and someone outside was about to knock again. The next day, I woke up to light streaming in through the lightwood windows. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee was already spreading through the house. Myrna woke up early and took over the kitchen, as if she had lived there for years. The guests were still sleepy, strewn across mattresses, couches, and pillows. It was the kind of pretty mess that only love causes. The first thing I did was walk to the balcony with my cup in my hand. It was cold, but the air was clear, and I was too. For the first time in many Christmases, I didn't miss anything. Patricia was the first to leave the room. He came to me with his cell phone in his hand and his eyes wide. "Uncle Floyd, look at this." She opened the Instagram app. The photos of our Christmas, those taken on the porch, at the table, with serene eyes, real hugs, had spread. But it was not only that. The short videos, the captions of her talking about respect, about rebuilding ties that don't hurt, were being shared by people from all over the country. This man is an example. My grandmother went through this. I cried watching this video. This is real Christmas. And further down, a different buzz. People commenting on another post. I went to check it out. It was Ashley's post. The same one from days ago. Minimalist Christmas with those who matter. But now, the comments had changed tone. Is this the father you despised? He deserves the world. You deserve silence. You don't throw away a heart like that. Ashley tried to delete some comments, but the internet is like the memory of those who have suffered in silence. It is not erased with a click. The tracks were there, and the silent trial had already begun. Greg, from what he learned later, was silent as well. He did not comment. He did not respond. He's always been the kind of man who prefers to avoid any discomfort, even if it costs the truth. Meanwhile, I felt something strange, no joy, nor relief, but a deep calm, like someone who sees an old wound finally heal without having to tear off the bandage. In the middle of the afternoon, the landline phone in the house rang. It was from the local Atlanta channel, WSB-TV. A young journalist wanted to do a short interview about the most moving Christmas of the year, he said. I thanked him politely. I said no, not because I didn't feel honored, but because I had already said everything I needed to with my gestures. I didn't want fame. I just wanted dignity. And dignity, I had recovered this one entirely. Funny how sometimes what we expect from justice is noise, applause, revenge, but true justice comes in silence, in the eyes of the right people. And that day, every glance around my desk, it was a sentence of respect. And if you've made it this far with me, listen to what I'm going to tell you now. There are things that we lose thinking it was everything, and only then does he find out that the everything was yet to come. But the most curious thing about this story was yet to happen, because that same afternoon, someone rang the doorbell of the house, and what I saw on the other side of the door, it was not regret. It was something deeper, something that would change not Christmas, but everything that would come after. It was the first Sunday of the new year when the letter arrived. No special stamp, no colored envelope. Simple, white, folded with a certain sloppiness, as if it had been written between tears and haste. It had no printed sender, but I knew that handwriting from the school notes taped to the fridge with heart drawings and shaky signatures of "Your daughter forever." Now, the letters were too firm, like someone trying to hold back the emotion tightly so as not to overflow. I sat at the living room desk, the dark wood desk that belonged to my wife. The sound of the house was that of the trees outside, nothing more. I tore the envelope carefully, not out of delicacy with the content, but out of respect for what I was, to what I tried to be. The letter was long, 3 full pages. She talked about everything, her childhood, the pressure of having to be strong after her mother's death, the silent demands she said she felt, the conflicts with Greg, the envy she felt at the lightness of my silences. He tried to justify Christmas. He said that he thought I wouldn't care, that I always accepted everything so quietly, that she thought would make no difference. She wrote about the house, about how shocked, hurt, even offended she was that I never told her. She said that it made her feel excluded, as if I had hidden a piece of myself, but at no time, none, she apologized. And that's when I understood. Maybe she doesn't know how to ask, or maybe, deep down, he still thinks he did his best. That had its reasons, that he didn't make that many mistakes. I closed the letter calmly. I doubled again as it came. I got up, walked to the bedroom, and opened the desk drawer. The same one where I keep my wife's letters, Ashley's childhood drawings, the birthday cards they sent me when they remembered. I put the letter there, not as someone who keeps a beautiful memory, but as if closing a chapter. I didn't answer, not because he didn't know what to say, but because I finally understood that it is no longer my role to correct, nor fix it. I tried for years. Now, I just observe. Outside, the village in Serenbe was quiet. The wind was blowing lightly on the curtains. The house was clean, at peace. The garden was beginning to show the first shoots I planted with Myrna at the end of December. And most importantly, that house was still what I promised myself it would be. A place where only those who come with love can enter. But as life likes to test the promises we make in silence, the next day, someone showed up at the gate. And what this person brought, it was not an excuse. It was something I didn't expect to see so soon. Perhaps never again. January started differently. Without the anxiety of what was to come or the weight of what was missing, it was just good silence, the kind that doesn't hurt. I woke up early, as always, but instead of making coffee in a hurry or going through grocery lists for a Sunday lunch that might not come, I just existed. The house was quiet, but live. On the porch, the Christmas lights were still flickering, half faded by time, and I let it stay. Not because I forgot to take it off, but because they reminded me that inside, Christmas had finally happened. A Christmas of mine. A whole Christmas. It was there, sitting on the same wooden bench where I read Ashley's letter a few days ago, that I made my decision. That house, built in silence, hidden even from those who should see me the most. It would no longer be a place of waiting. It would be lived. I wrote down on a piece of paper, last Friday of every month, night in Serenbe. And I started calling. First to Joseph, then to Patricia, then to Myrna. I invited him to a simple dinner, a movie session with the old classics. Casablanca. It's a wonderful life, those things that remind us of who we are and who we no longer want to be. Before long, others began to ask, when will it be next? Can I bring a friend? Is there room for one more? And that's how the house started to smell of good food, the sound of shared laughter, and a frequency that no longer depended on a holiday to happen. I learned one thing from this whole story. When dignity arrives, loneliness goes away. And you don't have to arrive making noise. Sometimes it's just a gesture, a no, a limit, a enough, said calmly. There was a day, around the middle of the month, when I found myself laughing alone while sweeping the balcony, because I realized that I started to walk firmer. My steps no longer dragged as before, and my voice has also changed. She was no longer short, shy. It was sweet, but firm. There are people who spend their lives seeking approval, and when he doesn't find it, he breaks inside trying to deserve it. I was like that, but now I no longer sought to be accepted. I accepted myself, and that changes everything. Even the mirror seems to look different at us. I also started planning a trip, an old desire that my wife and I had kept in a drawer along with the old postcards from train stations, to take the East Coast route from Charleston to Portland, stopping in small towns, eating at old diners, looking at life through the window of a boxcar. She was gone before, but I decided that this dream, this one, I would live. Alone, yes, but whole. And you see, loneliness is not the same as absence. When we really meet, even silence becomes company. If someone asked me today what I gained from all this, I would say emotional freedom. That's when you stop molding yourself to fit into small places. That's when you realize that you don't need to be accepted by those who taught you to hide. And when that freedom comes, you don't want to run away anymore. You want to live. But like every story that seems to find its peace, mine also had a new noise. Because on a sunny Friday, the intercom rang, and the doorman's voice was short. "Mr. Floyd, there's a little girl here saying she's your granddaughter." I stopped. The cloth was suspended in my hand. I didn't even know she could say my name, and what she brought in her hands made my heart beat like it hadn't since I held Ashley in my lap for the first time. She was there, tiny, with a yellow coat, and her mother's eyes as a child. In his hand, a drawing with crayons, a house, a tree, a table full of people, and in the corner of the page with crooked letters was written, "Grandpa." Behind her, no one, not Greg, not Ashley, only her and me. I lowered it to her height and asked, "Did you come alone?" She shook her head. "Mom said I could see you, but just a little bit." I opened the gate slowly, like someone who opens a book after a long time closed. I didn't know if it was an attempt by Ashley to sew up the pieces, if it was regret, manipulation, or just fear of the image that was left of her in the public mirror. But there, in front of that girl, none of that mattered. I took her hand and led her to the balcony. I sat with her on the wooden bench and she leaned her head against my arm. We were silent, and it was there that I understood. The old cycle had been broken, and another one, with more truth, could begin. No rush, no promise, only with presence. After that she came a few more times, sometimes with a drawing, sometimes with a cookie, always with a smile. I didn't put her in the middle of my wounds, I put it in the middle of my new beginning. As for Ashley, she never replied to the letter she wrote herself, and I never charged again. Her absence is no longer pain, it became a free space. And my friend, when we stop begging for affection from those who empty us, life begins to fit entirely within us. Today, my routine is simple. Every last Friday there is dinner, every Sunday there is strong coffee on the balcony, and at least once a month there is an old movie in the room, with loose laughter and an easy handkerchief. The house in Serenbe is not big, but it is full, not furniture, soul. Looking back, I see that what saved me was not pride, it was the limit. And those who truly love learn to set limits with tenderness. I spent my whole life offering space inside me to those who just wanted to use it, until my daughter asked for space. And I understood that she already lived where she should never have entered, in the part of me that accepted little for love. When she excluded me from Christmas, she gave me the greatest gift, the chance to start over. The lesson? Good. It is simple but heavy as a good stone at the bottom of the river. One can be good, generous, even silent, but one cannot be absent from oneself. No love justifies the abandonment of one's dignity, and if you've heard me this far, thank you very much. I know that telling this story was like opening an old door, and if it touched you in any way, if it brought you memory, courage, or just that desire to breathe deeper, leave your like. For me, this is a hug. And if you want to come back here in the next story, sign up. This channel is our balcony, and each registration is an accepted invitation to the next coffee. Tell me in the comments where you're hearing this. What is your city, your corner of the world? I like to imagine that every point on this map is someone feeling together, and it activates the bell too. That way you don't miss out when the coffee is brewed again. Now, if you thought this story was already strong, I'll tell you one thing. The next one that's here on the screen, this one will catch you in the heart in a way you might not even expect. Don't go away yet. Listen to the next true story that will appear on the screen. Always remember, each wrinkle tells a story, and each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story.